This MMA30 segment is powered by The Gun Store. Next time you're in Las Vegas, if you want to shoot a real machine gun, do it at The Gun Store at 2900 East Tropicana.
So UFC 136, Mahoney, one of the best fight cards of the year in your opinion?
I'm looking forward to it just because our boy Gray Maynard is going to be on it, and especially since, we saw how that last fight between Gray Maynard and Frankie Edgar went. But you got two title fights on one card? How can you be mad at that?
Well, and the rest of the card is amazing, too. Let's start by talking about what's happening on the prelims. Anthony Pettis and Jeremy Stephens. That's a great fight.
That is a great fight.
A really exciting fight.
I think, you got a hard punching guy in Jeremy Stephens with a good chin, and you got an exciting dynamic fighter like Anthony Pettis, who's coming off a loss. I think that's just going to be a barn burner. Jeremy Stephens is never involved in a boring fight, and I don't think that Pettis is going to be able to hold Stephens down, and try to nullify him there. I think this is going to be
hold him down. Anthony Pettis isn't going to try to hold Jeremy
Well, but
Stephens
who wants
down?
to stand and throw fists with
Anthony Pettis? Who wants to stand there and throw punches with Anthony Pettis?
Jeremy Stephens.
I know. That's why it's a great fight.
All right.
I love it. That's going to be on the prelims. That fight is for free on Spike TV next weekend.
That's a smart move, man. I think that's going to, definitely be like one of those fights that just...
The Leonard, Garcia, and Pham sort of fights?
Absolutely.
Which got bumped up to the main card. We'll talk about that in a second. Also, the prelims on Spike going to feature Demian Maia and Jorge Santiago. That's, maybe that'll be an exciting fight. Maybe not. I mean, Demian Maia's got fights that... sometimes are boring, sometimes are great. In his last fight against Mark Munoz at UFC 131, he came out and displayed some pretty good striking, so maybe he'll stand there for a little bit with Jorge Santiago. And when Demian Maia goes to the ground with somebody that he dominates, it is exciting.
Even that fight against Mark Munoz, Munoz was in trouble a few times in that fight just because the way that Maia had his back and so on and so forth. But Maia, if he tried, like I said, his stand up has come along exponentially in the course of his career. I think he's I think he's a top tier middleweight, and I hope he can get past Jorge Santiago. Jorge Santiago got just wrecked by Brian Stann, and I think Maia is going to come out the victor in that one as well.
It'll be interesting. Bumping up to the main card, the pay-per-view, you got Leonard Garcia and Pham. This is a rematch. These two fought a few months ago, or I guess,
been longer than that.
A year and a half ago now.
Not quite.
Back when the WEC was still around, they actually kicked off the broadcast that night on Spike TV before the very first WEC pay-per-view, and man, what a barn burner that fight. One of the best fights of the year last year, no question about it.
You're actually thinking of the Korean Zombie and...
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Chan Sung Jen and Leonard Garcia. We're talking about Pham and Leonard Garcia. Pham from The Ultimate Fighter, also a very exciting dynamic fighter. And this is a rematch from when they fought, what was that, back at the Ultimate Fighter finale?
Yep, Ultimate Fighter 12 finale back in December. So you're right, almost a year. And, it was a close fight. Pham lost it. A lot of people thought that was some of the worst reffing that we've seen in mixed martial arts in the last few years, and I'm glad that Dana and Joe Silva have decided to put this fight together again, because I think Pham got robbed absolutely in that fight.
A lot of people did. But that's again, another fight that's almost guaranteed to be an exciting barn burner. Another one that I'm really looking forward to, Melvin Guillard, Joe Lauzon. I think that Melvin Guillard's going to go out there and pummel Joe Lauzon.
This is a tough one, man. Melvin Guillard's biggest weakness. Anybody who stands with Melvin Guillard is asking to go to sleep, and we saw that with that fight against Shane Roller. Shane Roller is a world-class wrestler. This guy has shown that he could take down almost anybody in the lightweight division, but Melvin Guillard was just too fast. It looked like he was doing it in slow motion when he fought Shane Roller. But Joe Lauzon, he's got a good chin on him. He's got good striking, but Joe Lauzon really shines in his takedowns and his submission game, and I think that's where Melvin Guillard is the weakest.
No question, but Melvin Guillard is so dynamic. This kid punches and kicks and knees so hard. We've seen guys that are supposed to have great takedowns eat a massive knee from Melvin Guillard, like Shane Roller, when they're supposed to be taking him down, and just get put out.
But the difference between Shane Roller and Joe Lauzon is a well-rounded fighter. I mean, he is. He's one of these.
I don't know how much it matters.
You don't think?
I think that Melvin Guillard's so strong and he's so fast. I think that he's going to steamroll Joe Lauzon.
Again, since Guillard has been training with the guys down there in Albuquerque, he's looked like a completely different fighter, and he's one of the top tier in the lightweight division. This is a fight that, like I said, I'm not betting on it. It's a coin flip, in my opinion.
I would bet on Melvin Guillard all day.
You go ahead and do that.
Why don't you pull up the odds while I start talking about this next fight? Chael Sonnen versus Brian Stann. This one in the middleweight division. This is a real contender fight. I think whoever wins this one will probably get the next shot at Anderson Silva, especially if it's Chael Sonnen. Brian Stann may have one more fight to go because I think we can all agree that Brian Stann isn't quite ready for Anderson Silva just yet. Based on his performance against Chael Sonnen, of course. If he goes out there and just wrecks him, maybe my tune will change. But I don't think that Brian Stann's quite ready for Chael Sonnen yet.
I agree with you, bro. Chael Sonnen is, this guy is unpredictable. He's got a good chin. His stand-up's good, and he brings the fight, And where does Brian Stann lack? The ground.
Yeah.
That is where he absolutely lacks the most, and that's where Chael Sonnen excels. And going back real quick, Dave, you asked what that Melvin Guillard, Joe Lauzon line was. Melvin Guillard's minus 300, and Lauzon is plus 250. So most people are agreeing with you on that. So I actually think there's some pretty good value in Joe Lauzon. We'll break that down closer to 130.
Not.
Yes, there is. And we'll break that down closer to UFC 136
value
next
in that.
weekend.
If you lose all your money, there's no value in it. Mahoney is such a sucker for value. Listen, everybody listen. Mahoney loves to bet on the underdog because he's got a big heart, okay? Mahoney's a really sweet guy. He wants to support the underdog, and every time that he does that, he flushes his money down the toilet because he falls in love with words like value. There's no value in anything if you bet on an underdog and they lose. That
You're
means
saying that
you
Joe
get paid
Lauzon
nothing.
You're saying Joe Lauzon doesn't have a chance to beat Melvin Guillard?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
How many times has Melvin Guillard been submitted? 7 times.
When's the last time he got submitted?
I believe it was Nate Diaz. And it was Nate Diaz.
When was that?
At September 16, 2009. So 2 years ago.
Just 2 short years ago.
But when was the last time
he actually turned his life around?
When was the last time he fought a guy?
How many fights has he lost since then?
He hasn't lost a single one since then.
Oh, yeah.
But who has he fought that is on the level of Joe Lauzon since then? Nobody. The only one who could be even closely considered would be Evan Dunham, and Evan Dunham had the wrong game plan going into that fight.
Evan Dunham is on the same level as Joe Lauzon. And Jeremy Stevens is a tough fighter. He went out there and he beat him at UFC 119. And Shane Roller has got just as good a takedowns as Joe Lauzon. Sorry, he does.
Okay. Well,
he's a world-class
wrestler. Like I said, we're going to agree to disagree on that one.
Let's continue to talk about Brian Stann and Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen is walking around. He's saying, I am the UFC middleweight champion. Here's what Brian Stann has to say about Chael Sonnen walking around saying that he's the current UFC middleweight champ.
I take it as a fighter who is mentally preparing himself to win a world title. And, I walk around and even if I feel terrible before practice and people ask me how I feel, I tell them I feel great. How do you feel about the fight? I feel great. I always say things in a positive manner because over time, that's how you feel. If you constantly think and talk like a champion, you feel like a champion, you think you're a champion, and then you go out and perform like a champion. So it doesn't surprise me at all. I use similar techniques that prepare me for both, any competition and my life in the business world as well.
So Brian Stann there, maintaining his class, always figuring out a way to make it positive. Chael Sonnen's walking around saying, I am the UFC middleweight champion, and Brian Stann saying he's not offended by it. In fact, he appreciates it and understands why he's doing it.
You can't help but love Brian Stann. This guy, All-American Brian Stann. This guy says all the right things. He does all the right things.
Decorated war hero.
The dude is just legit, But then that's, and it kind of took a little of the wind out of Chael's sail.
And actually, because Chael is one of the best smack talkers in all of mixed martial arts, if not the best. And Chael Sonnen actually said that he didn't want to fight Brian Stann because nobody wants to fight Brian Stann because you can't say a bad word about the guy.
Nobody wants to fight Brian, but somebody's got to. Our paths have to cross. We're just in the same weight class. It's not that big of a pool, and he keeps whipping everybody. If he quit beating everybody, then I wouldn't have to fight him. But he decided to go out and become one of the top guys. So, I've done my part and put my time in, and I'm up there too. So, our paths have to cross.
And Chael Sonnen and Brian Stann actually trained together briefly a couple of years ago, and it's amazing. And Chael Sonnen's been nothing but complimentary of Brian Stann, saying looking the way that he progressed, moving down to middleweight, he's really starting to set the division on fire. Like I said, great fight. I don't think Stann's ready for Chael Sonnen yet, but if he does, Well, I think that a win over Chael Sonnen earns him the unfortunate title shot that he deserves.
What are the odds on that? Chael Sonnen, Brian Stann happening in the UFC middleweight division 1 week from today at UFC 136.
That is Brian Stann is plus 220 and Chael Sonnen is minus 260. So Chael, the big favorite going into that fight.
Jose Aldo defending his belt against Kenny Florian. Do you think that Kenny Florian is going to present the most challenges to Jose Aldo that he's ever had to deal with?
Nope. I don't. I think this is looking at these odds on this fight, Jose Aldo is minus 280, minus 265 in some places, and Kenny Florian's anywhere from 215 to 240 as the underdog. And honestly, I wasn't impressed at Kenny Florian moving down to 145 pounds. I think he's too skinny. I thought Diego Nunes shouldn't have been as big of a problem for Kenny Florian that he was, and he was a big problem for Kenny Florian.
But Nunes is a tough guy.
He is tough, but Jose Aldo is one of the best in the world, and I don't think that Kenny Florian at 145 pounds, one, has the speed or the strength or the technical ability to offer anything to Jose Aldo that he hasn't seen.
So it all comes down to sharp elbows. If Kenny Florian can put his sharp elbows to use and possibly cut open Jose Aldo, then he can win the fight. But
if he brings a gun to the fight, yes. That is how. I mean, Kenny Florian does have a bit of a reach advantage. He's got 4 inches on Jose Aldo, but he's going to have to get in there. And when he's going to get in there, he's going to eat a lot of leg kicks. He's going to eat a lot of punches. Jose Aldo's a lot more dynamic than Kenny Florian. I like Kenny. He's a well-spoken, smart individual who I think is good for the sport. I don't think he has anything to offer to Jose Aldo, and I think that this line. This Jose Aldo at minus 265, or even if minus 280, or even minus 300, that's one of the lowest lines that you're going to get Jose Aldo. That's one of the lowest lines that we've seen Jose Aldo have in years. The only other one that's ever been lower than that was when the Mike Brown fight happened, and nobody knew who Jose Aldo was at that point in time.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree that this is an easy fight for Jose Aldo. Kenny Florian is, I think, the most challenging fight for Jose Aldo to date. I mean, you look at the guys that he's faced and beaten. Mark Hominick, he's fine, but if you put Mark Hominick up against Kenny Florian, I'd have Florian all day. Manny Gamburian has just been exposed. Uriah Faber was just too small for Jose Aldo. Uriah Faber belongs at 135 pounds. And Mike Brown has also kind of been exposed. Before that, who do you have? Cub Swanson?
Yeah.
Jose Aldo's a great fighter. There's no two ways about it. He's one of the pound-for-pound best in the world. I just think that Kenny Florian is going to be on a different level than not necessarily all of his past opponents, but certainly some of his past opponents.
I think Kenny loses so much dropping down to 145 pounds. I like Kenny at 155.
He's
right.
Stronger.
He's, he doesn't have such a hard weight cut. We talked, or we saw interviews about Kenny just bitching and moaning about that weight cut, and how it was the hardest thing he's ever done.
It's
not a natural weight class for him, and I think that is going to be, outside of everything that Jose Aldo has to offer, his biggest hindrance in this fight.
Yeah, if he doesn't figure out how to effectively cut weight and get down to 145 pounds without killing himself, it's going to be a really tough fight.
His body structure just isn't meant for it.
And
it's
because
not.
This is a 5-round title fight, too.
Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
So
I think
what does Kenny Florian have to say about taking on Jose Aldo? Here, Florian says that, every fight's different, so don't count him out.
I think every fight is always going to be different. You're always going to have, a different mindset based on your training camp, based on your opponent. And, I've always learned from each previous camp, win or lose. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm thankful for those mistakes. And my goal is to try to make each training camp better and better every time, and to be able to increase my workload capacity and improve my skills. And I think I've done that for every training camp, and I feel good, man. I've trained my ass off for this fight, and I'm looking forward to going out there and competing hard on the 8th.
Jose Aldo, you said, is how big of a favorite? About a 2.5 to 1?
Jose Aldo's a 3 to 1.
3 to 1 favorite.
Yep.
Well, Kenny Florian discussed how he plans on beating Jose Aldo next Saturday night, October the 8th, down in Houston at UFC 136. Here's what he had to say.
Do I think I'm going to be the stronger guy? I don't know. It's one of those things that's hard to tell unless you get in there with the guy and you see who's stronger. All I know is I've done my best to improve my strength, I'm feeling pretty confident about that. But you never know until you get in there. As far as what I think I could exploit, I think that generally I don't think he's faced a guy who's as well-rounded and as experienced as I am, and that's what I'm going to bring in there. I'm going to bring in well-rounded skills, experience, and just going to see where the mistake lies, and that's it.
Kenny Florian, Jose Aldo, co-main event, UFC 136, UFC featherweight title is on the line. Main event, the UFC lightweight title is on the line. Las Vegas local Gray Maynard is going to be fighting Frankie Edgar again, and these two have faced off before.
Twice before.
Yeah, 10 years. Well, yeah. But
10 years ago?
No, 10 months ago we had these two fight right here in Las Vegas, UFC 125. It was the main event kicking off the new year on January 1st, and these two guys fought to a draw. Frankie Edgar got owned in the first round. After that, he had some really solid performances in the later rounds, was able to turn around a fight that looked like for sure belonged to Gray Maynard early on.
Is that fight nominated for Fight of the Year for the MMA Awards?
It's a good question. I think it is, but I'd have to double check. It should be.
It was, it's been so long since that fight's happened. It was the first main event of the year, and we're good friends with Gray Maynard, and Gray Maynard is one of these guys who you just can never count out of a fight, man. He's strong, he's determined, and he's got a chin just of a brontosaurus. So he's got a lot to bring to Frankie. But my only fear for Gray in this fight is I don't think that Frankie can hurt him. I don't. We talked to Gray. Even when Frankie was unloading everything that he had on Gray Maynard, Gray just stood there and took it and walked right through it.
Well, there's no question that Gray Maynard just beat up Frankie Edgar in that first round.
The problem is with Frankie Edgar is much like with Dominic Cruz. He's a point fighter. He's not a guy who's going to come out there and just beat the crap out of you. He's going to be the guy who comes out there and he jabs you to death, or he just works you, and he has great footwork, and he's just going to point you to death. And that's my one fear for Gray going into this fight. He needs to find a way to counter that type of activity from Frankie.
Well, and Frankie's coming into this one very motivated. He actually said that he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder leading into this fight, the rematch against Gray Maynard.
The respect's coming, man. It's gonna keep growing. The more the better I do, and the longer I keep this belt. And I try to come into every fight with a chip on my shoulder. Not for any reason, just because I'm eager to win, and having that chip on your shoulder helps you do so.
So I'm curious to see how quickly this fight starts between Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard on Saturday night.
I'm calling second round knockout, our boy Gray the Bully Maynard.
Second round knockout.
Second round knockout.
Okay.
This MMA30 segment is powered by The Gun Store. Next time you're in Las Vegas, if you want to shoot a real machine gun, do it at The Gun Store at 2900 East Tropicana.